Okay, Lectrosonics. I guess you're familiar with what we do, right? Most people here are. I'm very glad that the most important people in Finland decided to come here. Thank you very much. Um, so, uh, this is the drone view from our factory. This is actually a drone that went up from our factory, Sandia Mountains and New Mexican desert. Um, so, um, what do we do? What do we do well? We do well in the film industry. Um, these are some examples of Oscars that we um, help people win because they use Lectrosonics wireless equipment. Actually, as an anecdote, in the last 20 years, 19 winners of the Oscar for the best sound were Lectrosonics users. 12 of those 20 years, actually all of the nominees also used Lectrosonics. The 1 year that we didn't win, it was actually audio limited that was used. So as this, we can seed one opportunity in 20 years to somebody else. We're gracious like that. So 20 or 19 Oscars in the last 20 years for best sound. Some local TV stations use us. Even YLE's up there. Oh, they have some Lectrosonics. TV shows uses a lot of reality TV. Survivor and Deadliest Catch are on there because they use our waterproof transmitters. We're the only one that make a properly sounding waterproof transmitter. My demo model I had for a while, and I calculated how much time it spent underwater with the trade shows I do, and I came up to 8 weeks. And it still works. So it's another anecdote was in Hungary they have in a theater they have a show, a musical, where the main actor comes up through a river on stage. So he comes up through water. And they used to use Sennheiser 5212 in aquapacks. And they used to break like every other 4 to 6 months or something. They had to replace the transmitter. So finally, after 4 years into the show, they went like, we maybe have to think of something else because this is going to cost us a lot of money. So they changed their entire system to Lectrosonics, and they've now been doing that show for 6 years with still the same transmitters. And of course, a small TV show. Breaking Bad. Why is it so predominantly up there? Because everything have you seen Breaking Bad? Oh, yeah. Okay. Everything you hear in that show goes through Lectrosonics. So 100% of the audio takes are done wirelessly because they do not want to pull cables, because they had very rapid location changes in the production. And it's in the desert, so, sand and all that shit. So they didn't want to use cables, so everything you hear on that show is wireless. And Better Call Saul, same thing. We also do some stuff on Broadway, some small shows. What was our way in there? That was the small transmitter, the SSM transmitter. We didn't go in through the audio department, we went in through the costume department. Because Broadway is actually a fortress for Sennheiser. You can't get in. went in through the custom department, and they all of a sudden they realized, hey, you can put this in a wig of a normal size. You don't have to put a wig this size on somebody's head to put a wireless transmitter in there. You can use a small transmitter and still work. So that was our way in. And we even won an Oscar ourselves, because the digital hybrid that is for the 20 years, it's still a unique system, and it's the only way that allows you to do analog wireless with a flat frequency response and a straight phase result. So we won an Oscar for that, and that's the guy that came up with it. So thank him. Used all over the place by lots of people, sports, back use, guitar players, people that are paid too much money to appear on television. They call politicians. So what makes us unique? We like to pride ourselves that we are made in the USA. You couldn't care less, but we make everything in house, right? We do not outsource. Yes, the components they come from wherever we can get them from, but everything we make, so everything you see, the housing, the electronics, everything is made in house from us. We do not make consumer gear. It's only professional grade. So where other manufacturers might have this as a range, we have this. So it's only professional use. Award-winning unique product line. I might show you some details on that maybe. And our heritage is in the high-stake film production world. If you look in the United States, literally 80% of the big movies are done with Lectrosonics. Why? Because it's the smallest compromise away from a cable. That's it. It's that easy. It's every other manufacturer, every wireless, by the way, is a compromise from the use of a cable. If you want to have the best sound possible from a mic to your mixer, use a cable. There's no loss. There is the exact frequency response. You do not alter the frequency response, and there is no interference if you buy a good cable. All of that might be compromised by using wireless equipment. It's always a compromise. It's just up to you how big you want that compromise to be. So how much you want to let go to be able to have your liberty of movement. And I am personally convinced that the smallest compromise possible is through using Lectrosonics wireless. Digital wireless with flat phase and frequency response, with the accent on flat phase, because everybody in digital, if in digital you do not deliver a flat frequency response, you're doing something horribly wrong. Digital it rhymes with flat frequency response. Phase is something else. That's not that easy to do. So if you have the chance, and if you want to look at it, look at other systems and measure the frequency response, but also measure the phase response, and you will see it's not that easy. Ours is flat. It's so good even that if you're a real acoustician, you can use it for a test and measurement system. They use other systems too. We just found that out. Yeah, but I don't think that your peers will qualify you as a real acoustician if you do. This is our frequency response in analog. As you can see, it's flat. It's flat all the way from 40 hertz, okay, half a dB, but to 20 kilohertz, it's flat. Look at the noise level. Noise levels are always given in specs at 1 kilohertz, right? You put in a 1 kilohertz tone, and this is the noise level that they show you in their specs. Most of the noise levels are 1% for other manufacturers. And this is an independent measurement. This is done by Swiss Television. So I had nothing to do with this. When they phoned me to send me these responses, they said, we have cables that are not that good. So this is something to honestly be proud of. This is our digital measurement. And as you can see, the face is virtually flat, and the frequency response is absolutely flat. This is it's -3 at 20 hertz, but absolutely flat all the way up. So what do? Rack receivers, the DSQD. It's a 4-channel receiver, rackable. Hello. If you buy 2, you can all the accessories to rack them into a 19-inch 1U rack are provided. Dante and network control, tuning bandwidth from 470 to 614, and in the future also 537 to 694. So the 470, 614 is the band that you can actually use worldwide. It's legal everywhere. And the top range from 614 up to 694 is slowly disappearing in some countries. It disappeared in America, and might disappear here by the end of this decade, probably. Phase diversity, vector diversity, and frequency diversity available. So it's a 4-channel receiver with phase diversity. It's a 2-channel receiver with vector and frequency diversity. What our frequency diversity has on top of other frequencies, does anybody not know what frequency diversity is? It's I will not hit you if you say yes. You're allowed to not know. Frequency diversity, 2 transmitters, 2 microphones, and the either audio engineer or something else in the audio chain takes care of switching between one or the other. So if you lose one frequency, it switches to the other one. Normally it's the audio engineer because it's 2 transmitters, 2 receivers. So when he hears a problem, microphone goes down or transmitter goes down, he switches to the other one. The problem with that is, if the audio engineer heard it, everybody heard it. So it's too late, actually. In our system, it happens like true diversity before it happens. So if it senses a problem, it's going to switch before the problem actually becomes a problem. So it switches seamlessly between the 2 transmitters. But it also listens to the audio, because another very common problem, especially in live sound and musical comedies, is a microphone sweat out. That happens. It breaks. Because too much sweat and too much liquid, microphone breaks. If the microphone then goes to a transmitter that has perfect signal and better signal than the other transmitter, you might be screwed because it chooses the frequency, right? Not the audio. Wrong. Ours also listens to the audio. So if the audio is not good, it switches to the lesser frequency, but the better audio. So there is more points it looks to. The lowest latency on the digital market, 1.4 milliseconds from input to output. It's actually 1 millisecond if you look at the Dante. So if you come in with Dante, then to the output it would be 1 millisecond, but you have to add the Dante latency to that in this unit. Antenna pass-through, so antenna splitter integrated up to 4 units, so you can have 16 channels on one pair of antennas, remote antennas, in this unit without needing extra accessories. Backwards compatible with digital hybrid transmitter, so you can actually use all our transmitters we have been making for the last 20 years with our digital receivers, because they can also receive analog, and this is unique on the market. If you look at other digital receivers, they can only do digital, not analog. We can. Of course, one of the biggest advantages of digital, it has AES 256-bit CTR encryption. If you want, not necessarily, you don't have to do that. You can do it without a key, but you can also insert an encryption key, so it's really secret and nobody can listen into your audio. Portable receiver. This is a 2-channel true diversity portable receiver. The advantage of this unit against all other smaller units is that you can also put batteries in here, so it's actually redundant in power supply. If you have it on a cart and you plug it into a 12-volt power source and that power source goes down, then it will switch automatically to the batteries, and it's thus redundant. And we have a slot for an SD card in there, so you can record directly on your receiver, your 2 channels. And all the other references from the other receivers or receiver are in there. But one that comes out here is that it has a very high IP3. Anybody not know what IP3 stands for or what it is? Good. Thank you. Makes me feel useful. IP3 is a third in-the-mod interception point. It's actually a theoretical measurement, but it shows the linearity of your components. And the more linear your components are, the less effect your third-order intermod, which is the most dangerous one in wireless, will have on your end result. So the higher this number is, and this, again, this is a theoretical number. You know, it says nothing about your filtering, or it's just the linearity of your amplifiers. But the higher that number is, the more linear your components are, the less prone you are to third-order intermod products in your signal. So that means that you're cleaner. On top of that, we have very, very high performance input filters in this, which make it possible to work in even the most saturated, under the most saturated conditions. So next to TV transmitters and all that stuff, because it filters out the frequency you work on, and it disregards everything that's outside of that. On top of that, the linearity of the components will not mix inside with what happens outside. So it makes it a very high performance receiver. Where do you see this difference? In difficult situations only. So if you test this in a clean environment next to any other receiver, it will probably perform the same thing. If you take both into a heavily saturated RF spectrum, then this one will work and the other one will not work. And saturated spectrum is where we are all going. Now, small box, a lot of channels. The DSR-4, this is our, let's say, new flagship. It's a 4-channel receiver in a small box. Again, backwards compatibility with all transmitters we have been making for the last 20 years. A lot of people say, yeah, but before in your SRC you were also compatible with Sennheiser, and you were compatible with Audio Limited, and you were compatible with this and with that. Why don't you do that? It's a question of memory space. We're compatible with, in this unit, with 3 modes of digital modulation and 4 modes of digital hybrid. It's the EU hybrid, the Japanese hybrid, the NA hybrid, and the NU hybrid. So that all takes up memory space, which leaves no more memory space for other manufacturers, unless you want to pay $2,000 more for a receiver, which I don't think you want to. So it's a question of components and costs. So we took the step to make sure that we are compatible with everything we have been making for the last 20 years. And we will be compatible with everything we're going to make for the next 20 years, which is pretty unique on this market already. Again, the linearity of the components we use in this unit, which is sort of an obligation because it's so small, it gives a very high IP3, so intermodulation effects inside of the unit are reduced to a maximum. There's actually no manufacturers around that are this linear in their construction. Most don't even show their IP3 because it's not that high. Low latency and completely free in what you do. It's a 4-channel slottable unit, and there are more units like that on the market. Exactly one. It's analog, and it has a certain restriction that when you set your first frequency, and then even though you have 200 or 1000 megahertz of bandwidth inside of the unit, if you set your first frequency, the other 3 frequencies are limited to be within 24 megahertz of that first frequency that you set up in the other units. That is not the fact in this. Okay? We have 150 megahertz of bandwidth. You can use all 150 of them. So if you set one frequency to 470, you can have another frequency at 614 if you want. You know, you're free. It does all the modulation modes individually programmable for each channel. So you can have one channel in normal mode, channel 2 in high density mode, channel 3 in analog mode, and channel 4 in whatever else mode we have. It has analog AES and analog and AES outputs, which you can set for, I was going to say every single output, but that's not true because AES only goes in pairs. So you can set output number 1 and 2 to AES and still have 3 and 4 in analog. The outputs 3 and 4 on the back are mirrored to this. So if 1 and 2 are analog and you're in a slot format like super slot, then 3 and 4 are blocked because the super slot format doesn't allow for 4 channels to be inserted through the sub D25. So 1 and 2 analog into the slot, 3 and 4 digital or analog, whatever you programmed in the unit from the top. So you're never stuck with your channels. You can get everything out of the unit in any case. And more. Questions? No? No questions? No questions? Cool. I'm either very, very clear or very unclear. It's the two extremes are possible. Transmitters, body pack transmitters, the digital transmitters, the advantage over analog transmitters is their bandwidth. Their bandwidth is 150 megahertz wide. Our wideband transmitters in analog are only 75 megahertz wide. So you have more tuning bandwidth, less latency than in analog, because our analog latency is 3 milliseconds fixed, and our digital latency is 1.4. How is that possible? How the hell can you have more latency in analog than you do in digital? Well, our analog is digital hybrid. So we actually do some digital tricks before we send analog, and then we do some other digital tricks in the receiver to make everything sound good. And that takes time because we actually have 4 conversions. Audio comes in, analog to digital, we do our trick, digital to analog, transmit, comes into the receiver, analog, converted to digital, do our trick, and then digital to analog again. So there's 4 conversions in an analog transmission from Lectrosonics. That's why it's 3 milliseconds, right? But it's fixed. It doesn't change. So if you send a 1 kilohertz tone, then it's 3 milliseconds. But if you send pink noise, it's also 3 milliseconds. That's how we keep our phase flat. In digital, there's only 2 conversions. That's why it's faster. It comes in analog, then it's converted to digital, and it stays digital until the output of the receiver. So less conversion, it's faster. And it's actually the fastest on the market. It's compatible with all major lav microphones. I don't know what this is. Do you know what this is? This is DPA? Okay, this is DPA. Works good, doesn't it? But also with Sanken, Countryman, AKG, Sennheiser, Shure, whatever you want to put to it. We are a transmission manufacturer, not a microphone manufacturer. We have on this transmitter 2 versions, a TA5 connector and a LEMO 3 input version available. I prefer the TA5 because an idiot like me can solder one. It's always available all over the place, and it's not expensive. LEMO connectors are widely used, rarely available, a bitch to solder, but a lot of people use them. So a lot of mics are pre-wired to LEMO. That's why we do that. Superb audio quality. Again, one of the advantages of digital is that you have the bottom frequencies of your audio spectrum that are now transmitted as well. We transmit 20 to 20. But there is a lot more dynamic because there is no noise in digital. In analog, there is always noise because there's electromagnetic noise in the air. Okay, and if you then send an analog signal, the noise attaches itself to it, will mix with your signal, and then you need to solve that noise problem. That's why all analog systems have a compander. Anybody know what a compander is? Yeah? Okay. Raises the high frequency, compresses, sends, decompresses, lowers the high frequencies, changes your frequency response. Every single analog system uses this, except Lectrosonics, because we have digital hybrid. We have a patented process where we do it differently. In digital, you don't do this. In digital, it comes in, you digitize the signal, they become ones and zeros, then you have a codec where you reduce that message to that, because there's a whole lot of ones and zeros, and you have to reduce that because otherwise the transmission is too wide. And then you try to put that on your carrier by whatever modulation you want to use. We use 8 PSK. So then you send ones and zeros to the other side. Have you ever picked up the phone and heard a fax? That's what you hear when you scan a digital signal that's being transmitted. So that's ones and zeros. The electromagnetic noise is still attaching itself to that signal, but the receiver doesn't care because it only looks through the ones and zeros. It doesn't care about the noise. That's how the noise level in digital systems is way less. Another very big advantage of digital transmitters is they have way more dynamic range than an analog system. A normal analog system, because of the compander, will typically have 35 or 40 dBs of dynamic range because it's compressed and all that stuff. Our digital hybrid system had way more dynamic range than that. We had 65 dB of dynamic range, but in contrast, if you look at the digital system, our digital system has 118 dB of dynamic range. So that is a huge advantage, where if you do film or fiction or whatever, and you have actors that sometimes talk like this and also do that, then you can have it inside of your spectrum and noiseless. So high dynamic range is an advantage. Oh yeah, and all our transmitters are of metal construction. We don't do plastic transmitters. The DBSM and the DBSMD, the only difference between the two is this one holds one more AA battery. What does that bring? More battery life. You actually go from around 4.5 hours with a IKEA Lada battery to over 10 hours of battery life if you put two in. It not just doubles, but you actually have more. So everything you know from our older digital hybrid SM series transmitters is in this, except they are digital. So they have encryption. They have a wider tuning band range, and they have more dynamic range. Handheld microphone, not very widely used in the broadcast and film industry, but we do have them. Compatible with all Shure type microphone heads. So Shure, Electro Voice, Heil, Earthworks. We have adapters for Sennheiser and Neumann heads. There's a programmable button on there on the handheld transmitter. which is cool because you can program it to do nothing. I like that, because if it can do nothing, nothing can go wrong. If something goes wrong, it's my fault. So I want it to do nothing. But you can program it to have a temporary mute. You can have a mute, so you press its mute, you press its unmute, and it can be an on-off button. Some people want to have the on-off button, otherwise you have to open the mic to switch it off. And you can also program it to have an on-off button. But there is another one we can do with the button, which is talkback. You can actually program it to be a talkback button. So if you do a live event and you have somebody on stage, they sing into the PA system. It's output number 1 of the receiver that it's received on, and if you press the button, then you previously told the receiver if the button is pressed, it goes to output number 4, and that output number 4 goes to the sound engineer. So during the performance, you can talk to the sound engineer, or your director can talk to somebody else if he has how do you call that, voice of God mic. Plug-on transmitters, 48 volts, phantom power. More and more in our market here in Europe, you see people wanting to use pocket belt pack transmitters on the top of their boom because of weight and all that stuff. It depends on the market. In the United States, they refuse to do that. They are stuck to their plug-on transmitters. E&G over there is all plug-on transmitters. Why? Because they don't break. If you go to a handheld, oops, no, wrong button, sorry. So if you go to a handheld microphone, there's one fragile point, which is this. It's the antenna. When it falls down, this might break off. That's always a weak point in every single transmitter you find on the market, also in ours. On the plug-on transmitter, you can literally throw this through to the other side of a studio and it won't break. Yeah, actually there was a post on Facebook recently where somebody said that somebody did that, and I read all the comments that were underneath, and nobody asked if the plug-on transmitter broke. All the questions were, did somebody get hurt? Compatible with measurement microphones, compatible with dynamic or condenser microphones. It's digital, so 2020, encryption is possible, and very large tuning bandwidth. In-ear system we also have here. So the return, it was originally invented or intended by us to go into the live market, but we've seen a lot of TV productions use this because, one, superior audio quality to normal IFB systems or even analog in-ear systems, and two, there is a multiple way of how you can use this. Well, one, the encryption is also an issue because they want the transmission to be secret. Nobody can listen into it. So encryption was a point, but the other point was that you can either send stereo, and because it's digital, there's a perfect separation between left and right. So what you can also do is send two mono mixes over the same frequency, so you save spectrum, and that's how a lot of TV uses it. This is higher quality audio and spectrum savings. So, like I said here, either two stereo or 4 mono channels in half a rack unit. variable transmission power, 10, 25, and 50 milliwatts. Low latency, it's a whopping 0.2 of a millisecond more than our microphone system. It's 1.6 milliseconds for the in-ear system, and because of the perfect separation, there's a superb stereo image. It's not what you hear in your car radio, which is actually exactly the same as analog in-ear systems. It's simulated stereo. This is real stereo. Antenna splitters, redundant power supplies, combiners, antennas, but also, and this is, by the way, this is rare for Lectrosonics system. The next one is free of charge. It's our wireless designer software. All the new digital receivers can be connected to wireless designer, okay, through USB connection. So if you have multiple receivers in your bag, you can have a USB hub in your bag going to a tablet, because this works on Windows. The iOS is not ready yet. It works in a Mac, but not iOS. So Mac OS works, but iOS not yet. But you can have it on a tablet if you want. You can even have it on a wireless tablet. The only thing you need is a wireless hub to send to the wireless tablet. This will allow you to monitor all your receiver channels in the wireless software, and it will give you a very powerful frequency coordination. And frequency coordination, the more and more the spectrum gets occupied, the more and more that becomes important. You know, a lot of people say, yeah, but I have Freq Finder. Freq Finder is a very good tool. The only thing it doesn't do is look at the spectrum you're working in. Okay? It coordinates transmitters amongst themselves, but it can be coordinated on an intermodulation effect that's created by something else that's in the air that you can't see. And your receiver sees that. So if you have wireless designer connected to your Lectrosonics receivers, you can scan your spectrum, and then your frequency coordination will coordinate the frequencies that you use. They can even be external to Lectrosonics, because you can add custom channels. So if you are connected to a DSR4 receiver, you can have 5 Sennheisers working at the side. You just have to program them in manually, and it will do your frequency coordination around what it sees in the spectrum. This is a great tool, and it becomes more and more important. And again, it's free of charge. You can go to our website now and download it free of charge, and it works just as good. You just, to be able to see the spectrum, need a Lectrosonics receiver. All the other things it does. So, in short, what do we have? Cross-compatibility between all units. Well, that is if you have our digital receivers. Then it's cross-compatible with everything. If you have previous receivers which are analog, they're not compatible with the digital. The digital is compatible with the analog, but the analog, older analog receivers are not compatible with digital. Is that? Am I starting to get confusing? Stereo and mono. Because the digital receivers can also receive, all the digital receivers can receive the duet system, so we can actually have a stereo coming out of a DSR4. Encrypted and non-encrypted, one of the biggest advantages of digital. D2 standard or HDM mode, which is high density mode. What the heck is that? Well, it's one of the advantages of digital. If you have an analog system, it's designed to be in a certain way and it's fixed. So all your compromises and limitations of the systems are not changeable. The advantage of a digital system is that you can modify it. You want more range, you add latency. Or you want more range, you reduce your frequency response, and then the system can calculate faster, so you can walk away further. It's these kind of modifications you can do on the fly with a digital system. It has that advantage. So high density mode is, what do? You reduce a little bit your frequency response, and you above all reduce your transmission power. And then, because analog transmitters and receivers need to be more linear than digital transmitters and receivers need to be more linear than analog ones, the intermodulation effects already are reduced. But if on top of that you reduce your transmission power, everybody does that in high density mode, then the intermodulation effects become even less important. So you can space your frequencies equally. That's how other manufacturers say, we can space our frequencies with 400 kilohertz. Under the condition that you only use 1 or 2 milliwatts of power, right? That's the condition under which you can do this. So our high density mode reduces the frequency response a little bit, and it reduces the transmission power to 2 milliwatts. And then we can have 24 channels into one TV channel stacked without a problem. Tested it. You can go up to 40, but then you have to meet other conditions. So you, for example, if he would have one of the 40 transmitters, we wouldn't be able to do this, because then you have a problem. You have to stay within a certain distance of each other to meet those conditions. But you say, okay, 2 milliwatts, that's not a lot, so what would be the reach of the 2 milliwatts? I invite you to go to our YouTube channel. We did a test where we show that in high density mode, on whip antennas, on a DCR-822 receiver, we walk away 100 meters from our receiver and don't have signal drops. But that's a properly coordinated frequency. So what is possible? Depends. It shows that 100 meters is possible with 2 milliwatts under certain conditions. Portable and rack format. Some unique uses could be point-to-point wireless. If you have our duet transmitter, for example, you can easily connect that to a very high-performance helical antenna and then point it to a helical antenna at the other side and do a mile distance point-to-point audio. These kind of crazy things become possible if you meet conditions. Ambient return systems, we spoke about this. Aerosmith, Russell Dickinson. If you wonder who that is, if you ever listen to the Bad record from Michael Jackson, the guitar you hear, that's him. Oh no, shit, that's not rock, that's Paul Jackson, sorry. Guitar systems we do. A lot of production sound wireless microphone systems. Like I said, we do 80% of Hollywood films. And in the unique uses, waterproof microphones with good sounding audio. More of the previous Do you have any questions? Instead of so the phase is still the same. So the phase response is the same, but the frequency response is limited to 16 kilohertz. So the top frequency is a roll off at 16 kilohertz. In digital, the higher you go in your frequencies, the more space you need to sample those frequencies. So the higher your frequencies are, the bigger the message becomes, and it's exponential. So 20 hertz is pretty easy to transmit because it's a really small message. 20 kilohertz is an enormous message. So if you limit your high frequency response in your digital system, then your message of ones and zeros becomes very much shorter, and it's easy to encode and to transmit a short message than it is a long message. So look at other manufacturers. The ones you use actually transmit from 20 to 20, but there is two other ones that start with an S that actually stop around 16 or 17 kilohertz. Because of the size of the message and the reduction. So this is what we do in HDM mode. We reduce the top frequency response to 16 kilohertz. Latency is the same, but the transmission power is also reduced to 2 milliwatts. So we actually have power settings in the transmitters that are 10, 20, 25, and 50. And HDM mode. And the HDM mode reduces the transmission power to 2 milliwatts.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, bye.
Any other questions? Please. There, AES actually did a survey, and I think it's been some time. I think it's more than 10 years ago. And in the survey, it actually depends on who's listening. They stated it's mainly for musicians, and latency for singers and guitar players can go up to 15 milliseconds, which is pretty logical, because if you look at a guitar player, they're always, pretty far away from the guitar rack, and if they play on a huge screen that comes from the side fills, they're always far away. Singers, same thing. The closest they are to any return is their wedge they have in front of them, and that's at least 2 meters away. 2 meters is already 6 milliseconds, so that's what they used to. You and me are probably used to at least 6 milliseconds naturally, because you always watch the television. The television, you're always 2 meters away from your television. And 2 meters is 6 milliseconds, right? I mean, we're now, what is it? 3.5 meters apart. Roughly. That's 12 milliseconds for you. Here you go. Did you notice anything annoying? I didn't. So singers, guitar players can live with latencies up to 15 milliseconds on stage in their professional use. The ones that are worse are violin players and what they call wood players, so horns, flutes, and all that, because they have bone conduction, and that starts to be annoying around 4, 5, 6 milliseconds, depending on what they play. But the biggest problem, and that becomes better because we more and more start to work inside a complete digital environment. So you convert to digital, it stays digital, and then you do all your things inside of the digital realm, so you don't add any latencies anymore by exterior equipment. And then it comes out. So the adding becomes less and less. If you go back 20 years in the audio industry, then you come into your console, goes digital, and then you have to go to an effect machine, comes out analog, and it goes into the effect machine, and then it's converted back to digital and comes out again. So it adds, and then you ended up with 15, 20 milliseconds of latency sometimes. So the latency per unit was really important. Still is, because you shouldn't be too long. But it's not that important anymore. And again, it's just in real life, I mean, 3 milliseconds is 1 meter. The SSM.
Literally. You
Yeah.
can't do any smaller.
No.
It's physically impossible.
But depends on what you want to do with the transmitter. If you can make it smaller if you take away the LCD screen. You can make it smaller if you take some functionality of the transmitter, like adaptability to different types of microphone, because you have to be able to adapt the phantom power to the microphones, the polarity and everything. So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to have a full functioning microphone or transmitter, I'm pretty confident to say that the SSM is the smallest and the lightest you can get. If yeah, there are smaller ones on the market, but they have less functionality. Either audio quality, adaptability to microphones, screens, all that stuff. So, the SSM.